I begged her for an ounce of her strength so that I could put one foot in front of the other.
Tonight on 2020, an unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, but someone came between them.
He's like, Mom's dead, and he just kept repeating, Mom's dead, Mom's dead.
I ran downstairs and was hysterical, started vomiting.
She was found laying right here.
And I said, well, you can go right over there, because that's the person that killed my mom.
But just who was she pointing at?
This is a delicate question. Whether somebody that she was having an affair with could have shot or killed.
He started thinking about ways to engage his ex in strategy.
To get rid of her.
To get rid of her.
Hold on, he's coming out.
Tonight, a daughter's discovery of family secrets and scandals leading to a dramatic showdown.
Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
Behind the scenes, Kim was nonstop digging for answers, getting proof.
Now, a new courtroom development as we take you inside her obsessed 6-year crusade to catch the killer.
What kind of crime?
We're talking murder.
2020 tonight going into a dangerous underworld no one could have imagined.
Drugs and a lot of money, inevitably a murder of April Kaufman.
Before this hour is over, there will be another shocking death. But is that the end of the story?
This is my life, and I feel like this is the worst made-for-TV movie on the planet.
Good evening, I'm Amy Robach.
And I'm David Muir, and this is 2020. And here tonight, Deborah Roberts.
WIBG in Taco, South Jersey.
Driving the corridor between Atlantic City and Philadelphia weekdays between the hours of 2 and 4, you may have heard this voice on WIBG FM.
If you don't vote, I will find out I'm going to your house. I'm dragging you outside.
That's the no-nonsense April Kaufman, a peppery, provocative radio host.
I love being here to bring you the truth. As unvarnished, as unpretty, unbuttered on the biscuit it is.
Tackling topics from politics, caring for U.S. vets.
Homelessness is a big issue in our country right now for our veterans.
Listeners couldn't get enough of the Jersey girl with the platinum hair, big smile, and high wattage personality.
She was like a whirlwind. Like, she would come in and she would make a lasting impression on everyone.
In her upscale town of Linwood, New Jersey, not far from the boardwalk, April and husband Dr. Jim Kaufman, a prominent endocrinologist, are the community's consummate power couple.
The two of them were well known individually as well as together. They really wanted to be involved in the community. They also like to have some fun.
Every day, the doctor and Mrs. Kaufman had a familiar routine. Jim heading to his medical practice before sunrise, and then a standing phone call with April at 8:30 a.m. But on Thursday, May 10th, 2012, that call to April goes unanswered. And after several failed attempts, Dr. Kaufman sends over his handyman to their home on Woodstock Drive, where he discovers a horror.
911, where's your emergency?
Yes, I have. My boss is down. She's lying on the floor in her bedroom and she's not answering.
Okay, where are you, sir?
2 Woodstock Drive, Linwood.
Okay, hold on, I'm transferring you.
47-year-old April Kaufman found dead on the floor of her bedroom. With the family handyman on with 911, Jim calls Linwood police.
This is Dr. Kaufman. I just got called by my house person that my wife is face down on the floor.
My partner's sending out the ambulance as we speak.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm getting there as fast as I can.
Detective James Scopa took me inside the home where the wealthy socialite who once lived larger than life was discovered dead, shot multiple times.
She was found laying right here.
Face down.
Face down.
As the media got there and they started to realize who it was, that's when they knew, okay, this is really a story. It was chaos.
As the steady whir of helicopter blades begins swarming the sky, Jim Kaufman makes another phone call, this one to stepdaughter Kim Pack.
I answer the phone and I say hello, and he's like, Kimberly? And I said yes. He's like, Mom's dead. And he just kept repeating, Mom's dead, over and over. And as I got to the front, there was a police officer that put his hands out, and I pushed his hands away. And I go, where's my mom? Where's my mom? What is happening here? I need to see my mother. He said, we think this is a potential homicide.
No one could imagine who would have shot April Kaufman. Beautiful, blonde, glamorous, and she was fun. No one had any idea what was going on behind those closed doors.
She made everybody feel like they were her best friend. Didn't matter who they were, the checkout, the parking lot cart guy, you know, hey beautiful, hey handsome, how you doing today?
Friends Peg O'Boyle and Lee Darby knew April since she was a teenager and knew her well enough to know that her outward glow masked an inner pain.
She had a really rough childhood. When April was 11, her mother gave her brothers and sister up for adoption, and April was raised by her grandmother, and her brothers and sister were put into foster care.
You know, I think she had her thirst for being, feeling loved. She just wanted to be loved.
She would discover unconditional love at 17 when she gave birth to Kim with her first husband.
She was an incredible mom. She seemed to just instinctively know what to do.
She always spoke to Kimberly like a little adult, and we used to call her Agnes Beeswax, because she was this little old soul. April just wanted the best for her and gave her the best that she possibly could. She worked hard. April dropped out of school when she became pregnant, but she got her GED. She clawed her way back. She opened a salon, a catering business, a cafe, a charity worker.
But while April worked hard, she played hard too.
She liked motorcycles and fast cars? She did when she got her first motorcycle. She said, I'll give you $300 to get on the back of my motorcycle. And I was like, no way. My feet are on the ground. And she would be like, all right, $500. And I'm like, no, I'm not getting on the back of your motorcycle. Just the need for speed and wasn't afraid.
After 2 failed marriages, she meets Dr. Jim Kaufman. Friends and family say the wild child finally had found her match.
He drives a Harley, he's smoking cigars, he's a Green Beret in the military, a doctor.
In fact, this caricature sketched for Jim's 60th birthday seems to sum up the couple's life. There's April, the buxom Jersey girl, overshadowed by her larger-than-life new husband, who's prominently depicted with a gun, big cigar, and something else, military tattoos. Conditions.
There were 2 rules to this interview. 1, you can never ask my mother about anything pertaining to this interview. And 2, you have to destroy the tape when you're finished.
That's a little mysterious.
Yeah, but I just thought out of respect, this is what he's asking. He talks about how
motivated to mount a campaign, using her radio voice to demand quality health care for veterans.
This was such a big issue that affected our veterans and our state, our country. So I will thank my husband for a lot of the things that I've learned over the years. April felt that veterans should be treated like rock stars.
So how did this fierce and loved advocate for casualties of war become a casualty herself? Kim has an idea and approaches investigators with a shocking declaration.
As I made my way out into the cul-de-sac, I look up in the air, and there's all these news choppers flying up above. And I said, well, you can go right over there, because that's the person that killed my mom.
Stay with us.
Many who attended today's funeral services at Bethel Synagogue in Margate for 47-year-old April Kaufman.
Mother's Day 2012, the town of Linwood, New Jersey turns out for one of its own, complete with a cortege of veterans leading their champion, April Kaufman, to her final resting place.
The well-known local radio host, who was shot multiple times and discovered dead in her Linwood home last Thursday.
It was like a state procession for April Kaufman. No one could believe what had happened.
She just was so caring, so compassionate. She just was an inspiration to everybody.
Loss heaviest for April's daughter, Kim.
I miss her calling me nonstop, all the time. I miss her laugh. I miss her smile. I miss her infinite wisdom. Because she really was my rock.
After the mourning came the murmuring. Sometimes talk is cheap, even in wealthy towns.
This is a delicate question, but there were questions about whether your mom was having affairs.
They had a very unhealthy relationship, the both of them. And I will just say that there were indiscretions on both sides of the fence. And I'll leave it at that.
Did it concern you that maybe somebody that she had been involved with could have killed her?
No, but I certainly provided those people's names to the police. And I allowed them to do their due diligence.
While the community is in shock and awash in rumor and innuendo, listen to this, April's final radio broadcast, where she sounds like a woman who thinks her days are numbered.
And my bottom line is, if nothing else, of my legacy
of leaving, a really beautiful daughter and 2 grandchildren on this planet. I really hope to God that people, hey, I could get a flyover at my funeral now.
You listen back to that and you think, did she have a premonition? It's kind of like she was trying to tell us something, I believe.
In those early days after her mom's death, there's one thing gnawing at Kim. One person she's curiously not getting consolation from? Her stepdad, Dr. Jim Kaufman.
Dr. James Kaufman was a very well-respected and well-regarded member of this community. But to Kim, stepfather Jim was a very different person.
He was very cold to me, always kept me at an arm's length.
Literally. Just look at the pained body language in this video taken on Kim's wedding day.
1, 2, and 3. Here we go.
Take a close look. He steps into the scene. He smiles one time for the camera to flash. Then he goes back to a very taciturn demeanor and steps out. No hugging, no kissing, no warmth, nothing.
He would be in the dining room, I would be talking to my mom, and he would come and turn the lights off and just walk out of the room.
He controlled her cash flow and
yes.
how much money she could spend?
Oh, yes. And sometimes even calling her, who are you with? Where are you?
And just 2 months before April's murder, it seems the bloom was officially off the rose of her nearly 10-year marriage. Kim recalling a lunch where her mother confides she's had enough.
She talked about that she really needed to start aligning herself and getting herself in a good spot to be able to leave. I think that he had made it clear to her that she wasn't going to divorce him and take half of his empire. That was his famous words.
Did you get any feeling that your mom might have been in any kind of danger?
She had made it clear over the years that he had threatened to kill her several times, but would always follow up with, he doesn't have the guts to do it.
Though Jim is not named a suspect, some might say he begins acting like one.
Within days of April's body being found, Jim hires a lawyer.
Not only a lawyer, but the lawyer, a mob lawyer.
Ed Jacobs, one of the biggest legal names in Atlantic County. He's even defended Bill Cosby in one of his sex assault accusations.
He loves defending high-profile criminal cases. His walls in his office are covered with news clips of himself.
One possible reason he's not named a suspect? He's got an airtight alibi. That's him entering a local convenience store around the same time his wife is being gunned down.
Authorities are not releasing details, but it appears that Kaufman's shooting death was not random.
I meet him in a restaurant, and he says to me, let me tell you something. I have a very good attorney, and I've been advised to not speak to anybody about this. He's like, you might need to really start to realize that this is never going to be solved. And I said, well, I'm not going to realize that. I said, because I will never stop finding out. And I walked away, and I never spoke to him ever again.
As the months drag on, Kim says the only cold shoulder icier than Jim's is the one she's getting from then Atlantic County prosecutor Jim McClain.
I had several meetings with him, and he would just say it was active and open and not really say much more.
Did you get the impression that he was determined to get to the bottom of this?
No.
Then, on the 1-year anniversary of April's murder, many turn out for a candlelight vigil, including so many bets she made her cause. Noticeably absent, Dr. Jim Kaufman. He marks the milestone another way.
We discovered that he was getting ready to auction off all of April's belongings and hadn't given anything to Kim.
How crushing was that for you?
Beyond, because the things that I asked for that belonged to my mother were family heirlooms or possibly Disney coffee mugs.
With her mother and all those mementos lost, Kim tries to adjust to a new normal while raising her 2 young sons and holding down her job as a pharmaceutical sales rep.
Marching through every single day, waking up with another day of hopelessness while trying to keep that glimmer of hope alive is a very tricky thing to do.
Yet while life for Kim seems hopelessly on pause, for Jim Kaufman, it's full speed ahead. Just 15 months after his wife's murder, he ties the knot again.
He remarries Carol Weintraub. When did that start? Now, the version we've gotten is that they started dating after April was found murdered. Now that's some romance.
April's friends and family were devastated, and they felt like it was a slap in the face, but the people who support Jim Kaufman say, he's a widow, and he's moving on with his life.
But Dr. Kaufman's next move sets off a chain of events that pushes Kim out of limbo.
He went after my mom's life insurance policy.
And your reaction?
No way. Because you know what? This was my only attempt to maybe be able to get some answers, and the truth maybe would start to come out.
Now it's Kim's turn to lawyer up. Believing Jim is the killer, she files a wrongful death suit against her stepdad to keep him from getting her mom's $600,000 life insurance policy.
I have no choice to respond and to begin to fight for what I know is right.
The most significant kind of civil lawsuit you can have is a wrongful death case.
Coming up, a daughter undaunted, and the dynamic duo attorneys she hires begin digging into the case. What they say they uncover is shocking.
We were talking to people that were critical witnesses to us that had not spoken to the prosecutor's office.
And their chance to grill the grieving good doctor.
He was under oath in a civil deposition. They can ask him anything.
Next. Atlantic City, legendary for its slots, signature shows, and of course, this moment. But the boom and the bust of the casino industry has made America's favorite playground a hotbed for crime, corruption, and a startling number of unsolved cases. Cases like April Kaufman's, but Kim Pack and her dogged attorneys, Patrick and Andrew Darcy, drill down, determined to get answers.
Behind the scenes, Kim, with us, was nonstop digging for answers, getting proof. We were on an island, all on our own.
But the tide may be turning.
I grew up on the beaches and the boardwalk of Atlantic City, and I always say I have sand in my shoes.
Meet Damon Tyner, son of one of Atlantic City's fabled firefighters and a longtime cop.
Your dad was a bit of a legend.
Yeah, he was very well known throughout the community.
But the younger Tyner made a name for himself as a Superior Court judge.
Good to see you. How you making out? So they named a pizza for me.
I think right here.
Yep, that would be.
And then last year,
I, Damon G. Tyner,
became the first black prosecutor in the county's history.
So help me God.
Many seeing him as the city's much-needed savior.
You're doing a good job, man.
I appreciate it.
Great job. Thank you.
a lot.
Thank you.
You doing? You all right?
I know, I'm not judge anymore.
Yeah, good to see you.
That man's cleaning up AC.
There you go.
You took a pledge when you took the office. Tell me about the pledge.
Dating back to 1970, there are about 140 unsolved homicides. I urged my executive staff to tell me which cases were most solvable. Unanimously, they all came back to me and said the murder of April Kaufman.
But Tyner is sworn in almost 5 years after April Kaufman's murder. 5 long years.
A lot of people wondered why 5 years passed and no recognizable work had been done.
It wasn't that there were glaring mistakes. It was just an omission of effort, you might say.
We wondered about that and tried asking former prosecutor Jim McClain about the investigation. Spokesperson tells 2020 McClain has no comment.
Fortunately, Damon Tyner became prosecutor, and his team came to the conclusion that this case should be prosecuted. For the first time, someone's listening here.
Tyner agreed to meet Kim Pack and her lawyers within that first month.
What did that mean to you? The fact that I was lucky enough for him to say, I'm going to take a second look at this. Me, my case, thank you. Like, this is all I've been asking for this entire time, is for someone to care.
It took 3 hours for Kim's lawyers to unpack all they had uncovered.
You should take a look at these records.
But no evidence as compelling or illuminating as this.
Today's July the 11th, 2014.
A 4.5-hour long video deposition of Dr. Jim Kaufman himself, finally talking for that wrongful death lawsuit Kim has filed.
Basically, I ask the questions, you give the answers. Understood?
Yes. 4.5 hours under oath is a lot of time. It's a lot of questions.
I do. Okay. We may proceed.
That was the first time he could be compelled to talk.
There he is, in the hot seat for the very first time, getting grilled on everything from his love of guns.
How many guns do you own?
Approximately 18.
To the moment he first saw his wife lying lifeless on the floor.
I ran upstairs. I looked inside and unfortunately saw April lying there. And she wasn't moving, and she had a pallor, which I've known after 30 years is, I will say, someone has passed away. And I ran downstairs and went out on the lawn and was hysterical and started vomiting.
Okay, do you have tissues, by the way?
I got
You need to, like, when I look at a deposition, I sometimes turn the sound down. I don't want to hear what they're saying. I want to see what they look like and what their facial expressions are. He struck me as guy.
But there's a barrel-sized bombshell about to drop. The doctor's casual and stunning admission about a secret he's been keeping for years. Seems that time he spent in the Special Forces wasn't so special.
Have you ever served in any branch of the military?
No.
That's right, Dr. Kaufman forced to come clean about his so-called...
Did you ever tell Kim Pack you were in the military?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever do a project for college, and part of the project was you being in the military?
Yes.
And what you went through?
Yes.
And that you carried bodies?
Yes.
And the torture that you had gone through?
Yes.
Did you ever tell anyone that you were a Green Beret?
Yes.
Who'd you tell?
I don't recall how many people I told.
So you created this background that didn't even really exist.
That is correct. Once you start examining someone who is bold enough to engage in stolen valor, you start realizing that there are other aspects to this man's life that would require us to investigate.
But in that deposition, Dr. Kaufman posits his own theories about who may have killed his wife.
Who do you think did it?
I thought it could be someone who was one of the veterans. The last choice was that it was someone in a motorcycle gang.
What motorcycle gang?
The Pagans.
The pagan motorcycle gang? Remember, April had a penchant for motorcycles. Could that mean she was in deep with the kind of people known for violent behavior?
Pagan outlaws are the equivalent of the Hells Angels. They are felons of the most dangerous sort.
Coming up, a stunning turn in the Kaufman case.
No, I killed myself.
Leading to a standoff in the Garden State. We're on the beat with James Scopa, lead detective determined to crack a big case for Atlantic City's new prosecutor.
I was happy when Prosecutor Tyner came in and he allowed us to work on the case and investigate it like we believed it should be.
Meanwhile, Kim and her lawyers keep their eye on what they believe is the prize, Jim Kaufman, using his pictures on social media as incentive.
I would get a picture of Jim Kaufman and Carol at the Final Four, and, smiling, and I'd put it on my brother's screen so that when he came in the morning, that would be the first thing he'd see, is a picture of Jim Kaufman saying, yeah, so what? I killed her. What are you going to do about it?
But there's an unexpected canary in Kaufman's coal mine. It's coming in the form of a tip from the FBI. The feds believe Kaufman may be involved in another unrelated crime.
Lo and behold, another investigation related to insurance fraud. His role as a doctor comes up.
Investigators get a warrant to search his office.
So they show up at Kaufman's clinic just to look at his records.
On June 13th, 2017, we attempted to serve a search warrant at Dr. Kaufman's office here.
Within minutes, it's clear this will not be a routine visit.
Detective Scopa, prosecutor's office on the police meeting. Stay right here. Keep your names out there. No.
What does he do instead of ushering them in as most of us would with?
There. Changes everything.
The husband of a murdered South Jersey radio host and advocate is behind bars following an early morning standoff.
Investigators say that same day they seized more weapons from Kaufman and at least $100,000 in cash. That was a game changer.
After the standoff with Jim Kaufman, he goes to jail, not for murder, but for weapons charges. He fights to try to get out. The judge would not let him out based on his conduct, and that gives the new prosecutor, Tyner, a chance to really dig into the murder case.
Starting with the crime scene.
So this is the house here. The bedroom that April was found was upstairs.
But the biggest break in the case doesn't come from inside this house at all.
We knew Dr. Kaufman that there was a point in time that he was inquiring about having her killed. And
how'd you find that out?
We were able to get a witness to cooperate with us this past November. That broke the case.
And who was that witness? A former member of the Pagans Motorcycle Club. Remember them? They're the ones Dr. Kaufman had pointed the finger at in his deposition.
The last choice was that it was someone in a motorcycle gang.
What motorcycle gang?
The Pagans.
But now the tables have turned. One of those pagans ratting out Kaufman, and not just for murder. Prosecutor Tyner on January 9th, 2018.
Hey, Sergeant. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damon G. Tyner.
At a press conference, Tyner lays out the case of an elaborate and secret double life that Dr. Jim Kaufman was leading. Treating patients by day, writing fraudulent opioid prescriptions for those pagans by night.
they would come in and be patients. And all of a sudden you had a prominent endocrinologist that was prescribing opioids and all kinds of other painkillers when that wasn't quite his practice.
So he's got the power of the prescription, and then they've got the gang activity.
Essentially, they were flooding the market with opioids and selling them at a marked up price.
What a bombshell. This straight-laced doctor that everyone had respected was part of a pill mill, a drug ring. And not only that, with the pagan outlaw motorcycle gang. And April Kaufman found out.
Found out, and according to Tyner, threatened to expose his secret seedy double life.
He started thinking about ways to engage his exit strategy.
To get rid of her.
For the past 5.5 years since April Kaufman was found shot to death, there's been little movement on this case, and no arrests had been made in connection with the murder. That is until today.
An explosive breakthrough in the murder of radio host April Kaufman.
Murder charges just filed against Dr. James Kaufman in a plot that police say involved members of a motorcycle gang. But wait a minute, didn't the doctor have an airtight alibi? Remember that early morning stop at a convenience store? Tyner says Kaufman wasn't the shooter, that he paid one of those pagans roughly $20,000 to do his dirty work and kill his wife.
He went inside and he shot April Kaufman twice.
And ironically, that alleged hitman died a year and a half after April's murder of an opiate overdose. His pills prescribed by, you guessed it, Dr. Jim Kaufman.
When I heard the details of everything, it really was unbelievable. I feel like this is the worst made-for-TV movie on the planet.
The prosecutor worries Dr. Kaufman could be targeted by pagan members in jail, so they move him upstate to the Hudson County Correctional Facility as they begin gearing up for their first major trial. Finally, a chance to close one of those Atlantic County cold cases. But then, another shocking turn.
Dr. James Kaufman dead. Officials with the Hudson County Correctional Facility confirmed that he died at 9:20 this morning.
What was your reaction when you heard this?
I was stunned.
The story started off terrible and is ending terrible.
Dr. Jim Kaufman dead. But how?
Were you worried that he could be hurt in prison?
That's always a concern.
Will justice ever be served? Stay with us. It's been a long, strange trip for Dr. Jim Kaufman, from a plush suburban cul-de-sac to the Hudson County Jail. His new home, a 6-by-9-foot cell like this.
This is unit.
This is Charlie 500 East. Maximum security.
The inmates, many considered violent and dangerous, were Dr. Kaufman's new neighbors as he awaited his trial in a facility just across the river from New York City.
What kind of crimes?
We're talking murder.
It's rare to get a look inside these quarters unless you're an inmate, but corrections officers agreed to take us in, recalling that fateful morning. Just after serving Dr. Kaufman breakfast, they made a grim discovery. The doctor was dead, hanging himself with a laundry cord.
I was stunned, but that's, in retrospect, that's what convinces me now more than ever that he understood that the end was near.
He realized it had all caught up with him.
Yes, I think so.
Bottom line, he had his wife murdered, and the only way for him was suicide.
Kaufman did leave something behind in that jail cell. This note obtained by 2020.
Even in that jail cell, when he killed himself, he had to write this very lengthy suicide note to be in control at the very end, to get the last word.
Kaufman adamant that he didn't kill April.
I cannot live like this. No matter what anybody says, did not do anything to my wife.
This 6-page suicide note is bizarre.
Throughout the note, he quotes Latin, including phrases that Roman gladiators would say to the emperor before they fought in the Colosseum. Really?
His final words do add a surprisingly new angle to the sordid saga.
April came to me and said, would I like to go to a motorcycle rally to meet some of her friends? I was slightly shocked, to say the least, that they had the colors of pagans.
The most important thing that Jim Kaufman wants people to take away from this note is, I didn't kill April. She introduced me to this outlaw gang. I was prescribing pills. They then got aggressive with me. They then started threatening me. And they're the ones who killed April.
Were you able to determine whether April had any involvement with either the gang or the pill mill?
Our investigation at the time did not lead us to believe that she had any involvement. I believe that at some point she became aware of it. I think ultimately that's the reason why she was killed.
But dead men tell no tales, at least not in court. And with both that alleged hitman and Jim Kaufman deceased, Tyner's last call for justice would rest with the case against the accused pagan ringleader, who he believes conspired with Kaufman to kill April. Just weeks ago, that case unfolded in a New Jersey courtroom, Freddie Augello on trial. It took a jury less than 2 hours to find Augello guilty of all counts in connection with the murder of April Kaufman. A painful conclusion for a grieving daughter, yet a measure of solace. Kim Pack may finally find the justice she's been seeking for years.
Why do you think this case wasn't solved 6 years ago?
I don't know, that's the million-dollar question. But what I do know is that I was blessed and granted the ability to have peace in my life for the first time in 6 years by a man with determination and that believed in my story. And that is Damon Tyner, and I am forever grateful to that man.
Although in a tale as twisted and tragic as this, there's hardly any true closure.
And that's the saddest part of this entire story. Her mom's still not coming back. And when everything's quiet and it's just Kim and she's alone and she's thinking, her best friend's gone.
We were robbed. And for what? I still don't have the answer to that. For what?
When we come back, one of those precious family heirlooms sold at auction has been recovered. The secret message from beyond the grave found inside, next. Kim Pack doesn't just resemble her mom, she's inherited the same passion that made April Kaufman so beloved.
She's like a pit bull. She latches on and she's not letting go until she gets what she's looking for.
She's a mini April.
There's been dark days, very dark days where I just didn't know how I was going to do this. But I knew that I needed to stand up. This story needed to be told.
But in that darkness, something special. Remember when Jim sold off all of April's belongings? Turns out Lee Darby and Peg O'Boyle, dubbing themselves April's Angels, swooped in.
These women got together and they were on the phone calling people, raising money to be able to buy back things that belonged to my mother.
So that's how you got the last remnants of your mom's things?
Yes, and my mom collected these little Limoges things, and this was the first item that I touched from the auction. And inside this note, it says, "To Kimberly, from Mom. Whenever you look at this, you know you're always loved. You're so special. Best wishes for the rest of your life."
And you had no idea that note was there?
No, and I feel like this was meant to be. I feel like I was meant to have this. I keep this by my bed. It reminds me that my mom is with me all the time.
Out in the community, other reminders.
My husband and my boys got this bench dedicated for her. It's special because it's a spot that we saw. I think she would say to me now, "You can breathe. You can go on and live. You don't have to be sad anymore. And, thank you for fighting."
A fighter to the finish. Remember Kim Pack's civil case to get her mother's life insurance?
But we can report tonight that her attorney now says that's been amicably settled with Kaufman's widow. And that is 2020 for tonight. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Amy Robach. From all of us here at ABC News in 2020, good night.
My obsession is to investigate and find missing victims. I think that there is value in doing that, especially as we move this case along that no one else is looking into. Israel Keys said, "I'm a serial killer who's traveled the country for the last 12 years, and I killed over 50 people." He would travel the country and hide kits full of weapons, rape tools, sometimes costumes. He's known as the most meticulous serial killer who would plan crimes years in advance. This is about Keyes and his victims and their families.
Yeah, I have articles.
What's been really important to me is taking trips to places Keyes went to look into potential victims. If we can get people interested in this case and get more information out there, we're likely to get more information back, which could help us identify victims. Maybe I can find something the FBI couldn't. In an unreleased interview, the FBI reported that his victims ranged in age from late teens to the elderly. Now, there's a few things to note. My name is Josh Hallmark. I produce a podcast called True Crime Bullshit. I've returned to the tapes and files to reassess the period. In 2012, I was living in Seattle writing advertising materials for nonprofit healthcare insurance. I quickly found a coworker who was also a big consumer of true crime media and was fascinated with crime. And so we would have our weird little water cooler talks about crimes that were interesting or scary or, devastating. And one day she kind of peeked over the cubicle wall and was like, "Hey, there's this new serial killer. Have you heard about this guy?" And so that piqued my interest immediately. It was like, oh, there's a modern day serial killer? So we started looking at the Samantha Koenig case. Samantha Koenig was a barista living in Anchorage, Alaska. She was working at a drive-thru coffee stand. Was closing up one night in early 2012. A man came by, ordered a coffee. He crawled through the window and abducted her. The first ransom request texted the family to go to a park and go to the bulletin board there, and underneath a missing dog poster was a typed ransom letter. From there, they started, negotiating how the ransom would be paid via text messages between Samantha's phone and her father. He wants $30,000. In the meantime, the suspect's testing out Samantha's debit card to see how much money is already on it. That's what got him busted. They were able to follow the tracks of these debit transactions. Then they caught his rental car on camera, and that was it. His name was Israel Keyes. Keyes was arrested in Texas, March 13th, 2012.
Well, I was going to tell you that we're investigating. Okay. Play the knife right there. Capture.
They found a litany of suspicious items in his rental car. Women's clothing. They found large amounts of cash, tons of weapons in the trunk of his car.
Like I say, I would have preferred to wait until they find the bodies in Vermont, but it sounds like
a lot of the Keyes interrogations had somehow made their way to YouTube.
My concern at this point is not knowing, like I say, how current things are going to pan out. The information that I still have could come in handy.
I was fascinated by him. I think he felt like he was running game. He had been arrested, but he was in control.
And like I said, I don't want to give out everything all at once, but
He's named 3 victims: Bill and Lorraine Courier and Samantha Koenig. Keyes confessed he raped and killed Samantha in the shed in his driveway. He dismembered her, took her remains out to Matanuska Lake, about 40 miles north of Anchorage, and set up an ice fishing tent, and slowly and methodically submerged her remains in the lake. And then he went home and fed his family the fish that he caught while he was out there. About 6 months before Samantha, Keyes rented a car in cash, drove that car to Vermont, abducted 2 people from their home, Bill and Lorraine Courier, raped and murdered them. Their remains had been abandoned in a farmhouse. Keyes said, "I'm a serial killer who's traveled the country for the last 12 years. I've killed over 50 people." There's something excruciatingly terrifying about 50 victims. He's known as the most meticulous serial killer who would plan crimes years in advance and travel great distances. He was in almost every state while he was operating.
I was near the edge, but 30 feet out from the bank on that lake, it drops down to 50, 60 feet already.
My partner literally eventually started sleeping in the living room because I kind of turned our bedroom into like a war room.
I had her in the front seat, and
I was just all day long listening to Israel Keys talk about murdering people.
You have that computer. You wouldn't be giving anything away.
The bosses above us, though, don't know what's on that computer.
The FBI seized his girlfriend's computer as well as his computer. And while they were running data analysis, they found thousands of images. They ran those images through NamUs, which is a government organization for missing people, using facial recognition. And NamUs found 45 matches. Of those 45, the couriers were 2, as well as other victims I would investigate later. 9 months after he was arrested, he got a hold of a razor blade, and he slit his wrists and then used a bed sheet to hang himself in his cell. He was found several hours later, dead. They find a note, which is actually drenched in blood. 4 pages of freestyle writing. It looked like song lyrics from death metal bands he liked. It was kind of a manifesto. They found this drawing in his own blood of 12 skulls, and then it scrawled underneath it as "We are all one." The FBI believed these skulls represented Keys and his victims. So it's reasonable to assume that Keys had killed at least 11, probably more.
If I'm dead, then the investigation from the federal government's point of view is pretty much closed.
Many of the FBI agents who were investigating this case didn't want to give it up, but because of resources, and because Keys was no longer with us, they had to. It was narratively so different from what we're accustomed to, which is like crime, victim, killer, and here it was like killer, crime, victims? I realized here we have this killer who no one's looking into, and at least 8 victims who have never been identified. And that's where, like, interest became obsession. When I was growing up, I was always kind of an oddly curious kid.
His remains would be found buried here.
Even, like, as a weirdo little kid, I was looking into serial killers and missing persons cases. And then we had a family tragedy. My second cousins, they were about my age. There was a break-in at their home. A man kicked down the door, and the older of the 2 boys, who was, I think, 7, was running to call 911, and the man shot him in the stomach. And then he found the younger, Daniel, and he led him into the bedroom where their mother was hiding, and he shot them both in the head. Billy, who was shot in the stomach, survived. And, like, it hit home in a really real way. I really started, at 12 years old, evaluating my relationship with true crime. I think because I have an understanding of how grief and trauma affect people, it really struck a nerve with me. There was all these families who don't have answers, and the answers are with this guy who just killed himself. What's been really important to me is to look into potential victims. Producing this podcast, I can share this research, and the further we do it and the further more people get involved, we learn more. So here I am, over 10 years later, doing everything I can to find answers if they're there. Taking trips to places Keys went could be critical in the investigation into Keys. There's nothing that is going to stop me from going out and further investigating it.
He had researched and read other serial killers. Israel Keys didn't kidnap and kill people because he was crazy. Israel Keys did this because he got an immense amount of enjoyment out of it.
I consumed enough true crime that I knew about the Freedom of Information Act requests. So I filed one of those with the FBI. And then the files came. I was not anticipating over 4,000 pages. I start going through the files and the interviews, and the FBI has created a pretty substantial timeline. I can see where Keyes has traveled to. It's great, it's helpful, because there's a lot of components linking Keyes to potential victims. So first is like places he returned to over and over and over again, which is critical in his MO. It shows intent. Keyes had told the FBI every time he was out in the woods or any time he was out driving around, he would look for places that he could abduct people to or abduct people from. And then he would go back and wait in the woods for the right opportunity and the right person. So we should be looking for bodies near roads that he would have taken. Who went missing nearby? Can we place him in the area at the time? And I'm like, okay, add it to the timeline. And it's essentially the timeline of his entire life. I did a bunch of research, I talked to experts.
Investigators say Israel Keyes told authorities he strategically hid a box filled with weapons and tools near the Whiskey River.
Keyes quickly became known for his kill kits. He would travel the country and bury or hide kits, usually buckets, full of weapons, rape tools, sometimes costumes. Keyes talked about hiking there, thinking about burying a kill kit there. He had gone out there looking for victims. So.
And it's right off the road, so when you're driving through, you would see it and be like, oh, maybe I'll stop
there.
It's
a tourist destination. It seems like a really easy place to bury a body and have nobody question it.
It's heavy stuff to do on your own. And I was, in the first 2 years, working 68 to 80 hours a week on this by myself, with no one really to turn to.
I think it was because they were doing construction, right? Is that what you figured out?
They had done construction since I was never looking for a team. It happened very organically. There was no way I was inviting someone into this thing that I cared so much about, that I'd already poured years of my life into. Episode a couple days ago. 3 people weaseled their way in, and now I don't know what I'd do without them.
As an investigative journalist, one thing that we can do that the police can't always do is we have the time to kind of follow the rabbit holes that we want to follow.
I want to say certainty doesn't exist without forensic evidence. And I am not there yet, and I don't know that I will ever have the tools to be there. So unfortunately, at this point, it's me hopefully inspiring people who do have the tools to do the work. What's been really important to me is taking trips to places Keyes went to look into potential victims. What I can do in the field is see things that a computer can never show me. Being on the ground, you have a better understanding of the culture of an environment. And also, would someone like Israel Keyes blend in here, or would he stick out? Southern California is what I call a hot spot. It's these places we can put Keyes in over and over and over again. So this trip, I'm going down because there's a missing persons case out of Riverside County that I believe could be a Keyes case. We've done as much as we can online. Now I'd actually like to go see the terrain myself. California's critical because Keyes' girlfriend did a lot of work down here. I know for a fact he came down to Riverside or to this general area at least twice to visit her while she was working. There's a gentleman who disappeared from Riverside at a time where we can't place Keyes anywhere. Donald Tobin is an older gay man who was living in Riverside. Decided to go take some stuff to storage one day, and he was never seen again. Donald Tobin was last seen July 7th of 2010. His car was found about a mile from his house, and all the stuff he was going to take to storage was still in it. It was found in a place he would never go. It's a dog park near the freeway. And that was it. No one could explain what happened. We've also got Keyes' online search records looking for someone who disappeared in Riverside County that week when Donald Tobin disappeared. We looked at the timeline, and it's very tight, but Keyes was unaccounted for in about 20 hours surrounding Donald's disappearance. And as we got further into the investigation, we realized there was a very good likelihood that Keyes was trolling gay men online. Donald was gay. Keyes, he never came out of the closet socially, but he was bisexual and sexually motivated. I hope I can find how easy it is to stay concealed there and how easy it is to get from where the car was found to this gentleman's house without being seen. Something that will either make it seem more certain that it was Keyes or rule Keyes out. We are at Carlson Dog Park. This is where Donald Tobin's car was found. It's a couple miles from his house in Riverside. Then from here, we'll do a quick hike of this trail at Mount Rubidoux, get a lay of the land, see other places to hide. So you can see up here, there's houses just over here to the right. That's the neighborhood Tobin lived in. He lived walking distance less than a mile from where we are now. And again, this trail goes basically right into his backyard. I think it's about a block from his house where he was last seen. He's talked extensively in his interviews about stalking trailheads and using trailheads. The other thing that stands out is there's this cross up there. Key's mother was a big fan of extremist religions. They were in the fundamentalist Christian church outside of Spokane, Washington. He's raised essentially off the grid. He was not introduced to culture, other people, humanity, and was surrounded by people who didn't value human life, who openly hated gay people and black people and brown people, and I mean, imagine what that fosters. He's talked a lot about his animosity towards organized religion, seeing the cross up on the hill. He talked about wanting to kill people at religious sites and churches. What most likely would have occurred is Keyes broke into Donald Tobin's house and then abducted him in his own car, took him to a second location where he presumably would have sexually assaulted and then murdered him, took him to a third location to bury him, and then parked his car here. And Keyes could have easily from here walked back to wherever his car was without ever having been seen. Keyes wanted to create distance from his crimes as quickly as possible. And it's very easy for someone to get from here back onto the freeway in a short period of time. So if you look at the big picture, you've got a trailhead. You've got an environment Keyes is in frequently, and it's very compelling. I think it warrants further investigation into the potential that Keyes was involved in Donald Tobin's disappearance. I published all of this information as ethically as possible in the podcast and immediately put it out into the world. If we can get people interested in this case and get more information out there, we're likely to get more information back, which could help us identify victims. The other thing I look for is Keyes buried kill kits, often near locations where he planned on abducting people.
Had a 50-foot coil of nylon rope, duct tape, latex gloves.
Either he would literally bury them or he would hide them in boulders. Keyes would return to the kill kits.
So yeah, everything I took from their house I wanted to keep separate so I could go through it later. I thought they were in that bucket where the jewelry is, where the cash is, where the cell phones are.
He told the FBI items he took from his victims are in some of these kill kits, so they are very valuable.
Head west toward Ramona Expressway.
I'm going to go out to Lake Paris, where we have a very credible sighting, placing Keyes potentially with a kill kit. This particular tip came in with the FOIA files I got from the FBI in 2018. Former FBI agent Bobby Chacon is going to meet me out there. He actually worked the case and was responsible for finding one of the kill kits up in upstate New York. So this will be my first time going out to Lake Paris. It's also going to be the first time Bobby's been out to Lake Paris, so especially as someone who's seen places that Keyes has killed before, I know he's pretty eager to get his eyes on this place.
Hey,
Bobby.
Hey, Josh. Good to see you.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, no worries. It's my backyard, kind of.
Yeah. Bobby Chacon is one of the first people I talked to when I started digging into this case, and a really great proponent of the work I do.
I was involved in the Israel Keyes case when I was with the FBI. In fact, my dive team went to Alaska and we recovered his final victim, Samantha Koenig.
This tip came in shortly after Keyes died, before a lot of the details of the case had been made public yet.
There was somebody who identified Israel Keyes here as having met him one day.
This guy's out here fishing in March 2011, and Keyes approaches him. He starts talking about how he's hunting, and the guy's like, there's nothing out here to hunt. Key's like, I'm here to hunt prey. Was real creeped out by it. Keyes asks him, if you disappeared, would anyone know? He says Keyes comes out of the woods near the porta potties he's got, a rusted shovel, a Home Depot bucket, and a fishing pole. Then he sees him later hiking back up into the woods with this rusted shovel and a bucket. He said he immediately knew this was the man that he had encountered when he saw Israel Keyes' photograph. Wow. And so we know Keyes was active in the area at the time. And it turns out close to a year prior, Donald Tobin disappeared, within 20 miles away. On top of that, we have Christine Nicole Hamilton, also found on Keyes' computer. She disappeared not far from there. If Keyes was there, what are the greater implications?
I mean, look at all the places you have to hide something if you're going to hide a kill kit, right? You can see all these boulders and these rocks here. Those are the perfect kind of terrain that he could dig a small hole behind a rock and put one of those kits in the ground, and then he could use the rock as a marker. He could make a mental note of what that rock looked like and come back to it. Now, if you had to search that whole area, it would literally take you months because there are so many boulders, and that's why it's such a good location for him to use. But if I was here with an FBI team, I'd probably have 100 agents up there searching that hill, and it could take us a month. A lot of serial killers, they have this ritual that leads up to the killing, hiding those kill kits, picking out places that he would eventually use, even if he wasn't going to use it that day, weeks, months later. This was all part of who he was as a predator. This certainly has a lot of the elements that some of his other places we know he was at, like Matanuska. Lake Matanuska is the lake where Israel Keyes deposited his last victim, Samantha Koenig, when he murdered and dismembered her. A lot of criminals that decide to use water use it again and again and again because they feel like it's a place that evidence goes and never gets recovered.
So in terms of credibility on this tip, what do you think?
I mean, look, it fits all the criteria that Keyes used to kind of pick out not only victims but places. It definitely puts this place in contention for highly likely that something happened here.
So then it's like, well, there's probably a victim somewhere in the area. It's wild.
Be really surprised if there weren't bodies at the bottom of that lake.
Donald Tobin was last seen on July 7th. Police suspect foul play in his disappearance. We have a Keyes sighting several miles away, and the details of the disappearance match everything we know about Keyes' MO.
Every day, I comb through missing persons cases, and because of the nature of my work, I'm deeply aware of the gravity of, like, not only are each of these human beings who are attached to many other human beings, but there's so many of them. I keep going back to the main objective, which is there are families who don't know what happened to their loved one, and no one else is looking. I had covered Susie Lyle's case several years ago. Her name was found on Keyes' computer. There are a lot of significant circumstantial evidence to look at Keyes as being responsible for her disappearance. Suzanne Lyle was really intelligent, a really bubbly teenage girl. Grew up in the greater Albany area. Susie was a student at SUNY Albany. She was really into computers. She worked at Babbage's, which was at the time like electronics store, basically, like computer games and video games. And you have to remember, this is in 1998. She was like playing online video games and like really into the digital world before the rest of us were. And one night, Susie was working at Babbage's, and after leaving Babbage's, she was never seen again. Right around the time she went missing, Keyes was living in Constable, New York. Susie was about Keyes' age, 19 years old. She had a very robust online lifestyle, and that's something that comes up in the Keyes case. He said he was going down to Albany while he was living up in Constable and going to computer labs and libraries and using computers there. At a certain point, she told a friend that she felt like a man had been following her. And is it possible that the man that Suzanne felt was following her was, in fact, Keyes.
Keep right to take exit 3 towards Albany International.
What's great about this trip is we're going to meet Dr. Kunkel at the airport. How's it going? For coming out. Dr. Kunkel is a criminal psychologist, one of my favorite people. He's really immersed himself in all things Keyes.
I got involved with the Lyle case as part of the St. Rose Cold Case Analysis Center. We were asked by Mary Lyle, Suzanne Lyle's mother, to get involved and look at the investigation.
If Susie was a Keyes victim, it would have been earlier on in the commission of his crimes, so he wouldn't have been as sophisticated as far back as 1997 and 1998 when his crimes began. We believe, based on sightings, that Susie either disappeared leaving her workplace or disappeared getting off the bus at SUNY's campus. It would be perfectly natural for someone who looked like Keyes to be on a college campus.
Yeah, he would draw no attention here. All right, so the bus stop's over here, over closer to her dorm. It was a Monday night, and she's coming back from work. There's probably others coming from that direction, using the bus to get back to campus. It probably wasn't desolate.
Yeah. So I guess if she comes off the bus stop, this is one logical route to her dorm. It could have been an abduction site.
Right, yeah.
If you're Keyes, you're looking for a place where you can lie in wait and not really be seen. And there's not really a lot of that.
Basically, as we've been standing here, everybody who got off the bus and came to this quad walked up this walkway or down there through the trees over there and into the quad.
Yeah.
I mean, the only other point of access is like right here in front of everyone.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense at all.
It's a very high-risk environment.
No way to track whether she actually got on the bus. Back then, they were just showing their ID as a SUNY student and you just ride.
Now that we're here and we see how many people are around and what a short distance it is, it seems more likely that she went missing at Crossgates Mall rather than here.
We know she was at the mall.
Yeah.
That's irrefutable. She worked that day and her manager saw her leave and said he knows what exit she took.
Around the same time that Suzanne Lyle disappeared, just miles from where she was last seen, a woman encountered a man in a Marshall's parking lot that she believed was Keyes. What stood out to us was the things he was asking her. How old are you? If you left right now, would anyone notice? Some blatantly disturbing questions. These come up over and over and over again in tips in places where Keyes was. We could place him in the Albany area that spring, looking to abduct someone from a mall parking lot.
Suzanne Lyle was working at the Crossgates Mall on the night of her disappearance.
More than likely, she disappeared at the mall, walking from Babbage's to the bus stop. Right around the time Suzanne Lyle went missing, Keyes was looking on enlisting in the Army, and the Army recruitment office was 2 miles from where she was last seen. This is where Keyes enlisted in the Army. He, at that point, was really disagreeing with his parents. They were very anti-government, so it would make sense for someone rebelling, also someone who had a desire to hurt people, to join the Army. Joining the Army gives him a paycheck. And license to kill. And now maybe he's like, okay, it's time. I can start committing crimes in this area, because I'm going to be leaving soon. He told the FBI that he planned his murder around travels because after a girl is abducted, no one's going to look at the guy who goes off to the Army or left at 4 in the morning to go on vacation. He wanted to create as much distance, like physically and psychologically, between himself and his crimes.
So the Marshall's location to here is interesting. Basically just right across the street. It doesn't seem like he was actually trying to abduct her. It almost seems like he was ramping up. He was testing to decide what he'll do next.
But what killed me is walking out here, and the first thing you see is a cemetery.
I know.
He told the FBI cemetery outbuildings were easy to gain access to, and they were great places to rape and murder victims. And walkable through the woods to 6 Mile Waterworks Park, where there's a reservoir and tons of outbuildings.
Yeah. When you bring up 6 Mile Waterworks, it's the only body of water within like this 3-4 mile radius between the 2 malls, the campus, parking lot.
And 6 Mile Waterworks Park is in the center of all 4 points: Colony Center, Marshalls, SUNY, and Babbage's. You can walk through the park from any 4 of those points without really being seen. The fact that he could walk through that park unseen to all 4 destinations is fascinating. You had said they had searched it pretty extensively, right?
Well, they said they did, but I believe they didn't use dogs and they never checked the water.
And at this point, we know Keyes liked to submerge his victims' remains in water. If it was Keyes, Susie's final resting place is possibly Waterworks Park.
The timing of her abduction and his being in the area, and then the other signature Keyes offense patterns. It just makes sense.
There was a lot of compelling evidence there, but we can't say for sure we've solved the case. I don't think in terms of justice or closure, because I don't think there can be justice or closure in family upheaval. I think about Susie Lyle a lot in this regard. Imagine being known worldwide only for the worst thing to ever happen to you. When people want to talk about Susie, that's what they want to talk about. The first time I met Dr. Kunkel, I was invited to speak at an event in Saratoga Springs. Mary Lyle, Susie's mother, was going to be there, and I got to meet her, and it was so humbling to meet Susie's mom and hear her talk about Susie. It felt like I got to know who she was from the person who knew her the best. So, in a sense, if there is an obligation, it is to treat these people like more than just the worst thing that ever happened to them.
Both Chris and I are committed to investigating until there are no stones left to turn over.
Alright, yeah, take care, Chris.
Until then, I find myself obsessively driving the back roads of Berkshire County and upstate New York, looking for something.
In addition to the Suzanne Lyle case, there are others that I'm quite confident were Keyes, but I still would like a little more reassurances on. The first 2 are Cammie and Jean. Cammie was a high school student living in Oregon. She was 16. She had just met this boyfriend, Eugene. They decided to go for a walk out on the Oregon coast, and no one ever saw him again. The police quickly leaned into the theory and swept out to sea, and ultimately, the police stopped looking into it. Keyes had told the FBI that following his discharge from the Army, he had abducted a male-female couple from either Washington State or one of its surrounding states. I've looked into it extensively. There's only one case that matches that description, and it's Cammie and Eugene's case. Obviously, since the first episode, you know, I've had family members reach out to me, which is great, because that is an honor and a privilege and quite humbling to have those experiences and relationships and get to know these people and know that they value the work I'm doing. I'm always anxious about covering someone's case because I don't know how the family's going to feel about it, and I was appreciative that you reached out to me. I don't know, you've done a really good job of, like, bringing her to life and making sure she stays in the forefront of people's memories, and it's really wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, she was a special person. She was.
I mean, I've reached out to Lincoln County. I have not heard back, but I keep hoping the FBI will, like, release more of the redacted files at some point, and I think that's the best thing we can wish for.
And I cannot thank you enough. Like, seriously.
I have done very little, so I did the bare minimum.
No. Hands down. You've done so much. I'm just grateful that you want closure for the families, whether it's my family or other people's families.
We've also seen that while his memory for locations is startlingly accurate, it's the first time I've had a job that I believe in the work that I'm doing. I've even had law enforcement reach out to me to be like, hey, we have this missing persons case, do you think it's Keyes?
The most infuriating thing about investigating Israel Keyes is without a body or biometric evidence, It's nearly impossible to truly confirm he's responsible for any missing person.
There are all these families who don't know what happened to their loved ones. At this point, I am invested, and I care immensely. Maybe a very small price to pay for that is like, yeah, a serial killer lives rent-free in the back of my brain for the rest of my life.
The problem is nowadays, the more stuff my name is attached to, the more likely it is that somebody's going to try to do some kind of stupid freaking TV special, or, you know how it is nowadays, like this true crime book.
When I started putting the podcast together and writing the first season, I was very compelled by that line. Like, I don't want to be wrapped up in all this true crime bull. It's what I ultimately named the podcast. I thought it was a nice cue to Keys to be like, hey, not only is the media covering your case, but we're using your words to do it. More and more people are learning about Keys, and we're getting more and more information because of that, which could help us identify victims, which will help bring some resolve to families who, for now, over a decade, don't know what happened to their loved ones.
I added the remaining half, complete the life filled with love. I want my love to be like the ocean, let your whole life be immense. When the tide rises, the sea stirs at sea. It's that unique heart. You are like a bright red rose, always fragrant and seductive. As you come and grab my sleeve, the nostalgia is overflowing, it cannot be quenched.
Costumes. Keys talked about hiking there, thinking about burying a kill kit there. He had gone out there looking for victims. So.
And it's right off the road, so when you're driving through, you would see it and be like, oh, maybe I'll stop
It's
there.
a tourist destination. It seems like a really easy place to bury a body and have nobody question it.
It's heavy stuff to do on your own. And I was, in the first 2 years, working 68 to 80 hours a week on this myself, with no one really to turn to.
I think it was because they were doing construction, right? Is that what you figured out?
They had done construction since she was I was never looking for a team. It happened very organically. There was no way I was inviting someone into this thing that I cared so much about, that I'd already poured years of my life into. Episode a couple weeks ago. 3 people weaseled their way in, and now I don't know what I'd do without them.
I have no idea how I feel.
As an investigative journalist, one thing that we can do that the police can't always do is we have the time to kind of follow the rabbit holes that we want to follow.
I want to say certainty doesn't exist without forensic evidence. And I am not there yet, and I don't know that I will ever have the tools to be there. So unfortunately, at this point, it's me hopefully inspiring people who do have the tools to do the work. What's been really important to me is taking trips to places Keys went to look into potential victims. What I can do in the field is see things that a computer can never show me. Being on the ground, you have a better understanding of the culture of an environment. And also, would someone like Israel Keys blend in here, or would he stick out? Southern California is what I call a hot spot. It's these places we can put Keys in over and over and over again. So this trip, I'm going down because there's a missing persons case out of Riverside County that I believe could be a Keys case. We've done as much as we can online. Now I'd actually like to go see the myself.
was critical because Keys' girlfriend did a lot of work down here. I know for a fact he came down to Riverside or to this general area at least twice to visit her while she was working. There's a gentleman who disappeared from Riverside at a time where we can't place Keys anywhere.
Donald Tobin is a older gay man who was living in Riverside. Decided to go take some stuff to storage one day, and he was never seen again. Donald Tobin was last seen July 7th of 2010. His car was found about a mile from his house, and all the stuff he was going to take to storage was still in it. It was found in a place he would never go. It's a dog park near the freeway. And that was it. No one could explain what happened. We've also got Keys' online search records looking for someone who disappeared in Riverside County that week when Donald Tobin disappeared. We looked at the timeline and it's very tight, but Keys was unaccounted for in about 20 hours surrounding Donald's disappearance. And as we got further into the investigation, we realized there was a very good likelihood that Keys was trolling gay men online. Donald was gay. Keys, he never came out of the closet socially, but he was bisexual and sexually motivated.
I hope I can find how easy it is to stay concealed there and how easy it is to get from where the car was found to this gentleman's house without being seen.
Something that will either make it seem more certain that it was Keys or rule Keys out.
For the past 45 years, I have been investigating the unsolved death of my sister, Teresa Elmore. Teresa disappeared in Quebec, Canada in 1978. We were being told by the police that it could have been a drug overdose. Homicide is off the radar. She was not a drug addict. To me, her being found in her bra and her underwear in the middle of nowhere suggests sexual murder. I just wanted to know, whatever the truth was. It's decades later. I wasn't supposed to do my whole life doing this. I know my parents worry about me. I know my brother worries.
I feel very much that this is a story about two tragedies. It's important for me to be here today to be part of the work that John started on the investigation of my sister Teresa's death. I seriously thought about not doing it, but I would be able to live with myself if I didn't partake in this and try to complete the story in some way for John and for the family, for all of us. And I cycle at least 30 miles every day because I need 2 hours to myself. My sister definitely, I think, found a sense of escape on the bike. I even find myself like adopting her style, which was to ride low. And it's not a heady thing, I don't make too much about it, but I know what it is. I know why I do it. The more I investigate the murder of my sister, the more I'm forced to confront the horror of Teresa's death, because your whole objective is to know the truth. So I'm being forced to confront the place I don't really want to go, whether I like it or not. I come from a family of a brother and a sister. Teresa was my older sister. I also have an older brother, Andre. We all three of us were born in southern Ontario in Canada. It was always a fun time growing up. And with John and Teresa, there was always something going on. Never a dull moment. Teresa was fun, adventurous, caring. She would stick up for the little guy. And I definitely looked up to Teresa. We all did. By the late summer of 1978, Teresa had decided on going to Champlain College in a rural town called Lennoxville, about 100 miles outside of Montreal. My brother was also at the same school. Teresa was last seen around 6 o'clock in the evening outside the dining hall where students traditionally waited for the bus. Her residence was about 10 kilometers from the campus. The first realization that something is wrong is that she had told a couple of friends that she might stop by their room to listen to records late after she finished her book report, and she's a no-show. People are like, well, maybe she decided to go back to Montreal. We'll see her in class Monday morning. Monday arrives. There's no sign of Teresa. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, fellow students notify my brother, who was there, and say, none of us have seen Teresa.
My worry meter at that time was very, very high. Went to her room. Things looked like they hadn't been touched, and she hadn't been there. Then Friday, I called home, and I said, Teresa has been missing for a week.
My parents come into my bedroom, and they say to me, Teresa's missing. We're going to drive to Quebec to find out what's going on. There's meetings between my parents and the police and school officials. Some of the theories that the authorities told my parents were, your daughter is a runaway. Your daughter is a drug dealer and she's running drugs. Your daughter is a lesbian. She's ashamed and she's decided to isolate herself. None of those theories made sense to my family, but a missing person investigation was initiated. There were posters made up with Teresa's photo, have you seen this woman? And notices in the local newspapers.
My parents thought that the local police who were involved in the investigation were doing what they needed to do, but it wasn't really going anywhere. Now it's Christmas time, and we're all back home dealing with Teresa's disappearance. We all knew something was horribly wrong.
Our Christmases were so full of life. That was gone. But there was always that hope that this would resolve itself, and she would show up, and it would be some kind of grandiose misunderstanding. Good Friday, April 13th, 1979. It's spring, snow's starting to melt. There's a muskrat trapper at the side of the road in Compton, Quebec, which is about a kilometer from the student residence where Teresa had been living. And he goes into a small wooded area to set some traps, and he sees near some brush what he thinks is a mannequin. And as he gets closer, he realizes that it's the body of a woman. Face down in a small body of water, in her bra and her underwear, and he immediately phones the police. One of the investigators at the scene knew that Teresa's been missing for 5.5 months, so he makes the phone call to my father and asked him to come and identify the body. We all got in the car and drove to the headquarters of the Sûreté du Québec in downtown Montreal, which housed the coroner's office at that time. And my father walked down a hallway into the morgue.
To this day, I remember him coming back. He was as white as a ghost, and he just told us that it was Teresa.
The guy who went down that hallway was not the guy who came out the other side, and he was never quite the same again. When they actually do the autopsy, the coroner says, my conclusion is violent death. of undetermined means. Well, what does that mean? Violent death caused by her? Caused by someone else? What is it?
Undetermined violent means. Those words alone don't provide you with any closure at all on Teresa's death.
My parents were being told by the police essentially that this was her fault, that it could have been a variety of options that all blamed her. It was a drug overdose, and she wandered there. Some students found her dead in her bed and panicked, decided to wrap her in a blanket and dump her there. The message going out to the press is the same message. There's an article that's published very prominently, and the headline is Teresa Lore, A History of Drugs or A Drug Story. It was a very intense few days, overwhelming. For 5.5 months, we all questioned what was going on here.
I returned to Champlain College, and I was asked to attend a meeting with the head investigator on the case, and he presented me with 2 of Teresa's personal items. Number 1 was her wallet, and number 2 was her gray scarf. And he said, we found the scarf in the field by the bridge in Compton and the wallet over on McDonald Road, which was miles away.
Teresa's red wallet had been found at the side of a back road as if it had been tossed from a moving vehicle, which was inconsistent and bizarre.
I don't think we ever really made sense of it. My parents seemed to think that something happened at the residence. Something must have happened. Of course, to a certain extent, you do put that on yourself. Because I was at that residence, everybody knew one another. We were all living somewhat together. How could I not know something?
Right around the 1-year anniversary of her disappearance, my father was at a crossroads. Were they going to take legal action against a police force or against the school? What was the next step? And I think he just made the decision. I need to live now with my 2 surviving children and my wife, because that's the priority. And leave matters inconclusive in regard to the death of Teresa. At various points, I think we all blamed ourselves for this, because we were unable to do anything to stop it. But we all decided it was best to move on. By 2002, I'm no longer living in Canada, and I had a family of my own. I had a 5-year-old daughter, and I began to question the legacy of my elder sibling dying, and what was the message in that entire horrible event? What was I going to tell my children? I didn't have a good answer. So I realized that I needed to learn about everything to do with my sister's death. But I'm living in North Carolina, so I had to very quickly become a cyber detective to do the majority of my investigation online.
John was determined to investigate Teresa's case and get to the bottom of what exactly happened. I was probably a little more apprehensive about, jumping right into this.
The initial step was looking through libraries of newspaper digests and things like that. Then I phoned the Quebec police and I said, "Can I see my sister's case file?" They said, "Yes, I can." So the next step was to fly to Quebec and visit the police headquarters where the case file was. And it all kind of just cascaded from there. An investigator brought a box, and I methodically went through papers and testimonies and translating, what does this mean? At the conclusion of that day, as I left, I asked, what about the physical evidence? What about the bra and underwear? And he said, it's been destroyed, it's been disposed of. And I said, it's been what? Well, when did that happen? He said, well, that happened about 5 years after she was found. And he said it in a manner that was like, well, we do this all the time. I was shocked. This was another aha moment. While in Quebec, it was very important for me to see physical places. I wanted to see where Teresa was found, where the wallet was found. I wanted to see where she was last seen. And I'm right at the site where her body was found, trying to reconcile these theories of she might have overdosed in the residence, or she might have been a runaway, with how she was found, how she was dressed, what was missing, what was found further away. I came to a conclusion that this was not a drug overdose. This was a murder. This is a panorama of the dump site. At a certain point, I wanted for the public, particularly the residents of Sherbrooke, Eastern Townships, Lennoxville, to know what I was learning. And so I had a friend, Patricia Pearson, who was a crime writer for Toronto newspapers. And in the summer of 2002, the two of us together wrote a series of 3 articles. And I started a website called Who Killed Teresa, which investigated the unsolved murder of my sister. The whole purpose of it was for people to come forward and contribute information. After the articles, a reporter contacted me for a follow-up interview, and then rather nonchalantly, he told me that he had a document that he had retrieved, and it was a second coroner's report, not the one that said violent death of undetermined means. This document was from the day of the discovery of the body, April 13th, 1979. The new document was faxed over to me, so I'm reading along, and it says, strangulation marks around the neck. And I'm like, what? How does this piece of evidence reconcile with a drug overdose? To me, it points to homicide. But what you read on paper is only leading you to more questions, for which you want more information, which leads to more questions. So one of the things I wanted to do was to verify if there was drugs in her system when she died. And I was trying to find the toxicological report, and lo and behold, it was in my father's pile of documents, but it was kind of hidden, and it seems to me that he hadn't looked at it either. When I looked at the toxicological report, it stated undeniably that there were no evidence of drugs in her system. None. Nothing.
This was a huge eye-opener. Here's something that was determined years ago, but was kept from the family.
You have another document that flies in the face of the police's theory. They say drugs. This document says no drugs. I began to realize that, wait a minute, the police are an inhibitor to the process. Why didn't they fully investigate my sister's case? The realization that my sister Teresa was murdered naturally led to, by who? So I began to look at the public record about what else was going on at that time in the area around the college campus, and came to find that not only was it a time of intensely clustered sexual assaults against women, but also there were an awful lot of murders happening that I felt were related or informative to Teresa's murder. The earliest case is 17 months before Teresa's incidents. A woman in her 20s named Louise Cameron is last seen at a corner store in downtown Sherbrooke. Her body is found in the woods just outside of Sherbrooke. She was raped, and there was a bootlace around her neck. In January 1978, 10-year-old Manon Dubé goes missing in downtown Sherbrooke. Her body is found in a creek not far from where Teresa's body was found. In June, 18-year-old Carol Facteau is found naked in a stream. Her wallet is found deposited by the side of the road. None of the cases, Dubé, Louise Cameron, Carol Facteau, were ever solved. One of the things that just seemed logical to me to do, why don't we document where they were found? and see if there's some kind of association with the geographic plot points. The most striking thing about the map initially is somebody is committing a crime in the cluster around downtown Sherbrooke and then disposing of the evidence. What I suspected was that one offender was responsible for these murders.
John was developing more of a serial killer type of theory around what had happened to Teresa. This wasn't just an isolated case anymore. There were other women in the area that died in similar situations.
I needed the muscle of a professional, and that muscle was Kim Rosmo, who is a Canadian who was trained as a behavioral profilist by the FBI in Quantico. And we went to him and said, well, I have a map where I plotted all these points. He said, that's geographic profiling. Through the data points, what you want to arrive at is a probable location of where the offender lived or habituated, and ultimately who that offender was. I asked him, based on what we know, can you suggest an offender who would most likely be responsible for these murders? And he said, yes, I can, and his name is Luke Gregoire. Kim Rosmo told me Luke Gregoire had a rap sheet in the area for numerous sexual assaults and rapes, and in 1993, he committed the murder of a convenience store clerk, and for that, he was convicted and given a life sentence.
I thought that Luke Gregoire could have been the person who was responsible for Teresa's death and other women who died of a similar nature in the area.
So Kim Rosmo contacted the Sûreté de Québec, saying that it's highly probable that these unsolved murders were committed by one person, and the cases need to be looked at together. So that was the lever that was pulled to say, okay, police, you have your professional verdict. Investigate these crimes as the possible work of a serial sexual offender. The evidence stacking up against Gregoire, it felt I was moving in the right direction. The pursuit of Luc Gregoire was done in conjunction with the Sûreté de Québec. I have had helpful investigators and not so helpful investigators. And for a time, I had a very helpful investigator who planted a mole in Gregoire's cell to see if they could get Gregoire to admit something, and he never did. And then in 2015, he died in prison. There was no follow-up from the police. I wanted justice for my sister and my family, so I partnered again with Patricia Pearson to write a book. It was called Wish You Were Here, and it laid out the case against Luc Gregoire. One of the points of the book was for people to respond to it and say, you're right or you're wrong. The book comes out in the fall of 2020. You go fishing and you wait to see what you're going to catch. After the book was published, it took a while, but eventually people started to come forward with potential suspects. And in the fall of 2021, I received an email from a person living in the eastern townships in Sherbrooke, who I will call Alex, who wanted to report to me a deathbed confession by a relative named Gerald Lachance. And it was about an episode where he was involved in the abduction and murder of a young woman in the fall of 1978. So the story is this. Gerald Lachance was out joyriding with his older brother Regis Lachance, and a third person who was described as younger in the driver's seat. And they picked up a young female hitchhiker in Lennoxville, Quebec, where my sister was last seen. They proceeded to drive. Somewhere along the way, they pulled over the side of the road, and Regis got out of the passenger seat and dragged the young woman out of the car, down an embankment, and disappeared into the darkness in the night. After a period of time, Gerald gets out of the car to see what's happened. He walks down the embankment and discovers his older brother holding the hitchhiker underwater as if to drown or choke them. He says, "What's going on?" Regis bursts out and says, "Get back in the car." And they drive off in the night, leaving his young female victim dead or near death. The description of the event eerily matched what could have happened to my sister Teresa. Alex said also that the older brother, Regis, was already deceased by this point. And that not only was he responsible for other crimes in the area, he may have been responsible for other murders. Alex cited the 77 murder of Louise Camera. They cited the murder of Carol Facto in 1978. They also mentioned that the police possibly knew of him and that he was a protected member of organized crime. Protected means he was a police informant, meaning the lead suspect in your sister's murder is protected by the police. It is, holy take your breath away, yeah. I want to introduce a piece of evidence here, the red wallet belonging to my sister, which she had in her possession the day she died. The moment that Regis Lachance was profiled as a suspect, there was this realization that the wallet may hold a DNA sample that would match Regis Lachance. And I took the wallet and the Lachance DNA swab to a local lab. They tested them, and what came back is frustratingly the worst possible result. It was inconclusive. The wallet contained male DNA, and we didn't know who it belonged to. That was disappointing, very frustrating. Another dead end in so many dead ends, but you pick up and you try something else.
Miss Wallet, is this a piece of your sister's life?
I don't go there. I can't go there. The idea of holding the wallet and it holding some powerful connection with Teresa, that all of that is true, but none of that is very useful to me as an investigator, because you're trying not to mourn the victim, you're trying to solve their murder. So now I want to go to Canada for the specific purpose of finding even more supporting evidence that is compelling to say that this is the right suspect, Regis Lachance. It's going to be hard to say what I want to say. It's really going to be hard. I don't know if I can do it. March 30th was a devastating day. My phone rang, and it was a state trooper. John has been involved in an accident. Okay, what kind of an accident has John been involved in? There's silence. Where is John? Is he in the hospital? No, he died in the accident. He was struck by a car on his bike. I broke down and cried. I couldn't talk to him anymore. I had to hand the phone to my wife. We just couldn't believe it, that this had happened. Both John and Teresa died tragic deaths. It's really difficult to deal with. It's to get your head around. Why? What did we do wrong to deserve something like this? Where do you go from here? Where do you go from here? John
has done so much on his own over the last 35 years with all of this investigative work. This case continues forward, even without John being here. And I think that's very important to continue to do.
There is a journalist, Nicolas Barouche, who he's going to meet with in Montreal and discuss the potential of publishing a new article.
When I learned that John was killed riding his bike, doing what he loved, it was such a shock. 2 days after his passing, he was supposed to fly to Montreal. We were supposed to meet and discuss the way the story could move forward. John learned that Gérald and Régis Lachance were two brothers who lived in the Sherbrooke area at that time. Teresa was found. They were very violent men. John believed that Régis Lachance was the best candidate for being his sister's killer. We got this information through a deathbed confession from his brother.
I think Teresa was hitchhiking from Lennoxville to Compton, and she thought that she was going to get a ride to the Compton residence, and she got into the car with the wrong people. It's a hard thing to really process in your head, the way that she died. Probably because to a certain extent, I don't want to.
Prior to his death, John gave me the contact information of this person, a family member who got the deathbed confession. And I contacted this family member, interviewed them to write a story about the confession. But a few days before the article was to publish, this family member contacted me and basically they had cold feet. If this story comes out, it might upset some people who are still alive today, even if it's a story that happened many decades ago. They have people who could basically hurt you if you cross them. And so I decided with my editors to not publish the story because it would put this person in danger. And I know John was upset about that. He was not happy, but he understood. I feel that my duty now is to publish this best theory that we have, and to do it in a way that wouldn't jeopardize the safety of this person. And now I feel that it's upon me to do it.
Hello, Mr. Nicholas.
Hi, Stéphane. How are you?
Pretty good yourself.
I'm good, thank you. Stéphane Luce worked with John for many years. He's met with that person who's part of the Lachance family and got a deathbed confession.
What brought me and John together was the fact that I was seeking people that have lived the same thing that I lived. We both lost a loved one. He lost his sister and I lost my mother. She was murdered back in 1981. We became good friends. Once the first or second beer was taken, we would talk about cases and it would last for a few hours.
I'm writing this story, around the idea that John had contact with Régis Lachance's family member.
I heard lots of things, The most interesting element was the Régis Lachance theory. There were 3 persons in the car.
I got the same story you had. Régis Lachance reportedly was in the back with Teresa, and there was Gérald Lachance, Régis' brother. And there was a third person who apparently was the driver.
That's what I wanted to talk about with John, Who's the third person? Who's the driver? And I sent it to the police first, and, I don't think they took me seriously. Finding out who that person is, I think would be the key to the answer of this investigation.
The point to all of this is there is still the potential that the young man who was driving the car that night is still alive and therefore is a potential witness to the murder of my sister.
The driver. That person might still be alive today. What sense do you have of who that person might be?
It must be somebody very, very close to the Lachance. Most probably a friend or maybe someone part of the family.
At one point I was corresponding with a a defense attorney who had worked in that area, and he had told me about a case that he had worked on that had been really screwed up as a consequence to the police's actions, and in particularly the testimony of a police informant. The police informant's name was Regis Lachance.
We were shocked because did that status protected him from scrutiny? Did the investigators have an incentive not to dig in too deep into who killed Teresa? Did they explore every avenue, or it was more convenient not to do that? Did they ask, and they didn't like the answer they were given? This article can keep the ball rolling. Maybe a person who was afraid to talk like 40 years ago, even 20 years ago, maybe now they have something they want to get off their chest.
Yeah, exactly. At least answers will be given to the family. You know, I mean, John's parents and John's brother, they still need answers.
If that person is still alive today, the hope was that they can come forward and they can be contacted by the police, or it was at least a possibility that they could help solve this.
Well, I hope that someone will come forward and say what happened that night. I count on that article to get more answers.
John's legacy is, of course, the investigation work that he's done around my sister's death. He worked so hard on Teresa's case. It's also more than that. John had many different facets of his life. He was a stage actor, a budget director for the town of Durham. He was a family man. He loved his 3 daughters. I'll definitely miss John.
Do you mind if we film your little mouse sock?
No. My daughter is going to be so happy that you did. Whether it makes the final cut or not, she's just going to be happy. I wish Teresa could have known my kids. I see so much of her in them, in all of them. That's really the problem when somebody dies. It's less about the tragedy that they didn't fulfill their life, although that is sorrowful. It's more about how they left you to fulfill your life without them. On a very real level, I never feel that I don't have my sister. Spiritually, or whatever you believe, their wisdom carries on and informs you, or it becomes your wisdom or your sixth sense. I'm not alone on this quest. I'm not alone. I've never felt that way. All we do on this earth, ultimately, is we move through space, and it's just not the kick that it was moving through space without her. Alex, who wanted to report to me a deathbed confession by a relative named Gerald Lachance. And it was about an episode where he was involved in the abduction and murder of a young woman in the fall of 1978. So the story is this. Gerald Lachance was out joyriding with his older brother Regis Lachance, and a third person who was described as younger in the driver's seat. And they picked up a young female hitchhiker in Lennoxville, Quebec, where my sister was last seen. They proceeded to drive. Somewhere along the way, they pulled over to the side of the road, and Regis got out of the passenger seat and dragged the young woman out of the car, down an embankment, and disappeared into the darkness in the night. After a period of time, Gerald gets out of the car to see what's happened. He walks down the embankment and discovers his older brother holding the hitchhiker underwater as if to drown or choke them. He says, "What's going on?" Regis bursts out and says, "Get back in the car." And they drive off in the night, leaving this young female victim dead or near death. The description of the event eerily matched what could have happened to my sister Teresa. Alex said also that the older brother, Regis, was already deceased by this point. And that not only was he responsible for other crimes in the area, he may have been responsible for other murders. Alex cited the 77 murder of Louise Camera. They cited the murder of Carol Facto in 1978. They also mentioned that the police possibly knew of him and that he was a protected member of organized crime. Protected means he was a police informant, meaning the lead suspect in your sister's murder is protected by the police. It is, holy take your breath away, yeah. I want to introduce a piece of evidence here, the red wallet belonging to my sister, which she had in her possession the day she died. The moment that Regis Lachance was profiled as a suspect, there was this realization that the wallet may hold a DNA sample that would match Regis Lachance. And I took the wallet and the Lachance DNA swab to a local lab. They tested them, and what came back is frustratingly the worst possible result. It was inconclusive. The wallet contained male DNA. We didn't know who it belonged to. That was disappointing, very frustrating. Another dead end in so many dead ends, but you pick up and you try something else.
This wallet, is this a piece of your sister's life?
I don't go there. I can't go there. The idea of holding the wallet and it holding some powerful connection with Teresa, that all of that is true, but none of that is very useful to me as an investigator, because you're trying not to mourn the victim, you're trying to solve their murder. So now I want to go to Canada for the specific purpose of finding even more supporting evidence that is compelling to say that this is the right suspect, Regis Lachance.